Thank you for coming here today. This is a focused topic around naming. So if you're sitting in here, well, you might think you have a naming problem, or you got nowhere better to be, or you're my friend, so thank you. But this is something that actually nobody wants to talk about, but when they cross over the chasm of fear of change, it actually unleashes a whole new world. So I want to start with this brand here. Has anyone bought shoes from Shoe Buy? Any hands? No? That's weird. Has anyone heard of this brand? No. Yeah. So what about this brand? Heard of? Yeah? Yeah. So both of these were founded in 1999, both online shoe retailers doing same thing. Zoom 10 years later, Shoe Buy sold to Walmart for $70 million. Zappos sold to Amazon for $1.2 billion, and I'll do the math, that's 17 times more. And what actually Zappos, little fun fact, they started as shoesite.com and then realized there was a shoebuy.com, and they thought, oh, that's a problem, and they weren't getting clicks, and so they renamed after Zapatos, which is Spanish for shoes. And while Shoe Buy essentially became a commoditized brand, has since been resold again, and by the way, doesn't even exist today, Amazon still has the Zappos brand alive. And so this is the difference between a generic, non-ownable name and a $1 billion moat, in this case, that Zappos created. Shoe Buy is the equivalent of community bank or People's Credit Union. And I'm sorry if that is your name, anybody. But those names, while yes, they are very straightforward as to what they are not ownable, and they become a problem. And what happened with Shoe Buy and other names that are generic is that you have a name tax you might be silently paying. And that tax can be costing you millions, in Zappos' case, billions. So another show of hands. I'm not going to make this a public shaming, but is your name or any names of competitors in your market, do you see any of them on this list? Anybody? Show of hands. Yeah. So these are the top 20 most common bank and top 20 most common credit union names. And of the 9,200 financial institutions, there are actually 6,000 instances of these names. 6,000. And in some cases, multiple, like First Trust Savings Community Bank. And that is because, as you know, banks, many of them, and credit unions were founded decades, in some cases over 100 years ago, when there was like no internet, and you were just the first national bank, like these guys. There are 700 financial institutions with First in their name, and 218, as of right of this moment, First national banks, and they look like that. And if you kind of squint, they all look the same, and you'll notice a lot of acronyms in there too. Acronyms don't fix the problem, people, just keep that in mind, to sometimes make it worse. And so we've got a big sea of sameness going on here, but there's some real data behind this, and this is actually an average of several different studies that are showing the difference in marketing costs with distinctive versus generic names. And what you see here in the cost per acquisition, you literally can be paying twice as much to acquire new customers with a non-distinctive name. And this is all recent data from 2025 and 2024. So generic names may be costing you 30 to 60% more. And then this is a study of our own client that we rebranded. They were American Bank, who doesn't like America? But everything in America is America, and they couldn't get any clicks. And so American versus Bravera, if you look at these stats, the average cost per click, $25 versus $1.20. Ultimately, these were costing them phenomenally 10 to 20 times more, with 4 to 6 times less conversion rates between the generic name and the ownable name. And that's why you rebrand. So I'll take you through a little story of a rebranded, in this case, bank that did not want to, but they had to. So Citizens National Bank, Longview, Texas, East Texas, they had just finished a branch transformation exercise, spending a lot of money with us, just the right amount of money, obviously, but a lot, to refresh all of their branches. The last thing they wanted to do was change their name, but they acquired a bank in the Austin area to move into Austin, because that's where the growth is. And there was a problem. There were not only 19 Citizens banks in Texas alone, but there were 5 Citizens National Banks in Texas. And so they had actually coexisted with this one you can kind of see over here in their circle. And it was still annoying. They got each other's complaints and got confused, but they could exist together. When they went into a new market, there was another Citizens already there. And in those 6,000 instances that I showed you of those common names, it means nobody owns them because they're not distinct enough to be owned. And when that happens, it's first right of squatter. Who was there first? So that Citizens Bank had legal rights to use that name in Austin and sued our client and said, you can't come here with that name. So they were forced to change. And because they had just spent, so much money, we were able to keep a lot of the same visual essence of what they had, their color palette of turquoise and orange, not the best color combination, but hey, it's ownable, and rebranded to Vera Bank. This was very much rooted in genuine banking. That became their tagline. They had farmers' roots. They love Vera Bank. Vera means truth in Latin. And you can see there the quote by the CEO. They wanted something distinctive. And fast forward 8 years later, Vera Bank is thriving as Vera Bank. These are some new buildings we've just built and opened, 95 years in business, only the Vera best. They have fun with that. And actually, they have a lot of fun with this brand. Very, very happy to be your bank. And what they might be violating in brand standards in some cases, they are getting in cultural uplift and fun and brand love and loyalty in spades. And actually that cultural uplift, as is oftentimes the case with renames, was something they didn't expect. And so, okay, that's a great story. Look at how they've grown, 93% in asset growth. And 12% CAGR annualized over this time. That's 25% above their peers. Everything is growing in Texas, but they're growing even more, and they were able to expand into new markets. Happy story, yay. So let's go back to, though, where it started. They didn't want to do this, and actually, nobody wants to do this. But there may come a time when your name starts working against you. And so at that time, if you think that might be the case, you have to stop asking the question of why should we change if what we've done is working, and start asking the question of, but what advantages lie on the other side if we do? And so I am going to start hammering you with example after example of different use cases of different banks and different credit unions that have successfully crossed this chasm. So how do you know when it's happening? The name is working against you. There are 3 macro scenarios. The first one is actually the most common. Your name is turning away growth, and really, this is an audience problem. You're not attracting who you want to reach. The second is M&A related. As you grow, you acquire, you are merging, whatever, it becomes a problem. And this forces change. Even if you can get over number 1, then like Vera Bank, you might have to deal with number 2. And then number 3 is a geographic problem. It's limiting where you can grow. So I'm gonna go into some examples of each of these 3 things. So the first one, audience exclusion. Your name turns away growth. Think of it as like an invisible bouncer that is keeping people out. And also think of it as that silent tax you are paying on every single marketing dollar. You are starting from behind, you have to work harder. And then ultimately, you are not attracting the audiences you want. You're not attracting the customers, you're not attracting the members. This is the signal of your name might be turning away growth. So, if any of you were in my colleague Juliet D'Ambrosio, she's the CXO of Adrenaline, she did an amazing Winning Gen Z workshop. She talked about this name, County Fed. So there's actually multiple problems here. Santa Clara County Federal, they're in Santa Clara County, Silicon Valley. They shortened it to County Fed because, that might be better, except not only does County Fed say county employees, public sector government, that was their old seg. They had switched to a community charter, expanded their field of membership, but Fed sounded like a jail. People thought they were a jail. And as the Gen Z people says, what do they say? It's giving penitentiary. Yeah, that's it. So that's like not, the greatest association. So this is now, on this one, a little behind the scenes of the process. And I will say, no one wants to rename because it's not easy. But if you do it and you do it right, and you do it, please, by the way, two things. Don't do it yourself, and whoever you do it with, make sure they've done it before. And that's just advice. But this is how it goes. So thousands of names on initial brainstorm, and not just like anything like Turtle Bank, but what is based on the strategy. And so we had a very specific strategy for this credit union, a brand strategy. Then you whittle down for initial review, and even those are going to be legally vetted because you don't want to show a client something that they Google it and they're like, oh, I see this credit union right here. So we have to do that. Then you go down by storytelling and getting everybody to agree, and that's not easy either. You go down to a final few, you test them in research, and you legally vet them, and about half of them will break your heart because they're not available, and then you select one. So that's all. So here you see one of the final presentations we gave, and you start to see some different themes emerging. The brand strategy was very much about inclusivity, being one for everyone. They have a very diverse member base, also a large Hispanic population, so a lot of Spanish-themed names here. You can see a spirit of optimism in all of these. They loved all four that you see highlighted. Their favorite was Mira. There was a legal problem, and so we were able to change it to Mira Star, and that became their new name, and thus County Fed is Mira Star. Beautiful logo. This is actually a kaleidoscope. It represents the kaleidoscope of the communities they serve. And then when you see inclusivity on all of the names that are shown, and this is saying we're for everybody. So this is the opposite of having an invisible bouncer at your door. Instead of maybe a jail, it looks like somewhere that you want to go in and somewhere that's attractive to every audience you want to reach. Even initially, this one's still new, 18 months later, they've had 28% organic asset growth. And again, unity, pride, momentum, great story. Another example, and now I'm going to make them look easy, like it was this, and then we just changed it to this. The reality is not easy and convincing. This teacher's credit union, the CEO himself had designed the logo, so it was very special. And they were at the time one of 200 and something teachers credit unions. And he did say you have to keep the ball, so we said, okay. And so we turned it into this Everwise Credit Union. But what's great in this story, their teacher heritage roots are not lost. Everwise, that logo is an open book. It's a tree of life. And now this is ownable. We're bringing in purples, colors. And this is one of the most common, certainly on the credit union side. You've got a generic name, but a seg name. And when they changed, only 11% of their membership was teachers. And so teachers is a problem if you're not trying to attract just teachers. And then a final example on the bank side, this is back to the common name, Citizens National Bank. And by the way, if you get this presentation later, you'll notice that logo is almost a carbon copy of one of the other Citizens banks in Texas that I showed you. This one's in Louisiana. I don't know, they're copying each other's logos. Anyway, this was a non-ownable name. And so because of that, it's actually if it's trying to attract everyone, it's not attracting anyone. We're all citizens, sort of. So this was rebranded to Bonvenue. They're in Louisiana, French roots. This literally means good welcome in French. They treat their customers like royalty, although yesterday the marketing director said people had been misusing the crown and putting it on pictures of people's heads. But in any case, it's still a beautiful brand, a great step forward, and of course, completely ownable. So, a reminder recap of Signal 1. Your name is excluding your audience if it is irrelevant. If it is the name of a seg that is no longer your only seg, credit unions, or if it is generic and everybody owns it. We will go to Signal 2. M&A. This forces your hand. And so, as I mentioned, some people think, we can get away with how we were, but names are actually killing deals. And we have now been involved in multiple scenarios of deals that got stuck because they couldn't agree on a new name, or whose name are we going to choose, especially with merger of equals. If you're all equal, I can't take your name or your name because then it won't be equal. So what do? Or you get into a multi-brand model because you acquire and say, you can keep your name, it'll be fine, we'll all be together and we'll start running multiple brands, and this can be a ticking time bomb. So this story is a very recent one. It's not even launched yet, but don't worry, I can show you what I'm going to show you. These are two banks in Georgia, one in North Georgia, one in South Georgia, that were trying to merge, could not get over the name problem, and the deal got stuck. And then an interesting thing happened. Synovus and a larger Pinnacle based in Tennessee merged and announced they would be becoming Pinnacle. Well, that is now a 400 branch network that's in and around, besides the Atlanta market where this Pinnacle owned rights to, everywhere else. So if I'm that Pinnacle and I'm about to be surrounded by this much bigger Pinnacle, that's a problem, I think. So they decided to merge. They announced they're going to be coming up with a net new name in Q2. And they announced this last quarter. And just a couple weeks ago, have announced that Valiant Financial will be the name of the holding company. We have not yet released the name of the bank. It'll probably sound similar. And this is a great story of getting unstuck and then also differentiating. So this is a true merger of equals. These are the two largest credit unions in Vermont. Vermont State Employees and New England Federal. That is VSECU plus NEFCU. So a lot of things going on there. Now, what was interesting, they actually had a ton of cultural unity. They're like, we're the same, we love each other, we need to be together. But even with that, you still have a lot of things to work through to actually make a decision about a new name. So as we went through the same process, thousands of names, dozens of names, we started centering around these ideas, their shared belief in community and sustainability, tying to their Eastern Seaboard roots, and also very much the promise of a new day was their spirit. And so East Rise Credit Union became their name. And a nice little trick with names like these, when you take two words that are real words and put them together into a compound word that didn't exist before, suddenly it becomes ownable. So this is considered a fanciful name by the US Patent and Trademark Office, and they could own it, but it doesn't sound like a pharmaceutical drug. That is the Vermont state bird, the thrush. And as this came to life, I mean, truly it was gorgeous. A lot of natural textures were used. It had to feel right for them, bespoke for them. All the difference from Robert Frost's poem, that favorite line, Robert Frost is from Vermont, and all the difference is their new tagline. So a nice little story. American. What I like about this one that I told you, I already showed you their cost per click problems, they had acquired a couple banks and were about to acquire a couple more. And they did the thing like, we'll acquire you and keep you, maybe, I don't know. And also, their name wasn't necessarily excluding anyone specifically, but again, it's so broad, it's America. They proactively decided, nope, we're going to go to one brand for now and forever in the future, and two, we're going to make it ownable. And that's when Bravera Bank was born. And the CEO of this bank ran into me about a year after this launched, and he said, Gina, it's so weird. Everyone says they see me everywhere now, but we're in the same places we were before. And that's what a standout, ownable new brand will do. And remember that time I said ticking time bomb. When you have multiple brands, and I've had some heated discussions with some people about this. When you have them, there are some scenarios where temporarily it might be the right decision for your organization. But I am here to tell you that it is an inevitability that eventually you're gonna have to deal with it. And Park National Bank, when we met them, that's the holding company, they had 12 different brands, they were actually competing with themselves in Ohio. Like that's not good. And so we took their holding company name, Park, but new logo, new brand, and there were fiefdoms here. I'm talking the regional bank presidents were almost picket protesting. They were so mad about losing their identities. But then when we did it, they all say it's the best thing we ever did because they're stronger together, they're unified, perceived scale drives acquisition, and the marketing efficiencies or inefficiencies that were turned into efficiencies were exponential. So as a reminder of Signal 2, you may have a merger brand problem if you are a merger of equals, are preparing for future M&A, or you need to reconcile past M&A. And that leads me to Signal 3. Your name limits where you can grow. And what you're going to start to see here is actually there's a lot of combinations of 1, 2, and 3 with multiple problems. But think about this. Think about the outsider effect. You may have a name that everybody loves it where we live, and it sounds like where we live, and people love where we live, so that they love us. But guess what happens when you go somewhere else? You look local, but not to where you're going, and you're an outsider, and that's not good. And then what if you're trying to unlock borderless growth with digital, and you're trying to grow places where you don't have either a physical presence at all or a strong physical presence? That's a problem. So this is generally a geography problem. Merrimack Valley Credit Union, they were located in Merrimack Valley, and this is the area of Greater Boston and Southern New Hampshire, and they had made an acquisition of Bridgewater Credit Union. Then they made another acquisition, and this is also now an M&A problem. In fact, this ended up being a merger of 3 equals. If you can imagine getting two to do nice is hard enough, but getting 3 was a real special challenge. So multiple problems here, but had they not a geographically limiting name in the first place, they wouldn't have had this problem. I'll go through all the things I said, and boom, Bright Bridge Credit Union. This is the new brand. This actually just rolled out last year, and now they have a unified way of bridging to their members throughout all their life stages and life journeys. It is full of optimism. It is very appropriate for their market and their people. There's a lot of working class. There's a lot of, we want to lift people up. And you can see how it comes to life. They wanted to attract Gen Z, but also not be alienating to all their demographics. And this is what it looked like. And then, boom, we've got unification from Merrimack to Bridgewater, yeah, whatever, see, you don't even, to RTN that are now all Bright Bridge, and obviously Bridgewater, and that was hearkening back to Bridgewater and Bright Bridge, but they're all unified, and now you have the impact of scale, perceived presence, and perceived convenience and ubiquity, and you're a stronger brand. So, example 2, Kern Schools Federal Credit Union, located, again, very surprisingly, Kern County, California. Again, multiple problems here because they've got schools in their name along with the geographic problem. And if ever people were weirdly attached to a credit union name, I don't know, Bakersfield, they're real, like people live and die there, and they really loved their name, and we thought there could be a mild uprising, but there wasn't. And because they had a problem, obviously this is massively limiting, and they had a 9-county expansion growth plan, and so ultimately rebranded to Valley Strong. Valley was actually on that common name list I showed you, but when paired with Valley Strong, boom, it becomes a compound word. Now it's ownable. And because of people like living and dying there in the valley, we had to look like something that wasn't new, something handcrafted, a badge. And you can see the messaging, our roots run deep, serving the valley. Some of these older ones, this is from 2018 that we can track over time, have great results. In this case, 166% asset growth. Forbes named a #2 credit union in California, but most importantly, this accelerated a 10-year plan of 9-county expansion into a 3-year plan, and they're still expanding. And finally, Community Trust Bank, a beloved Louisiana name. Oh yes, Community Trust, everybody knows it, we love it. Changing would be the worst thing we could imagine ever. Well, they're moving into Alabama and most notably Texas. And like that other Citizens Bank story with Farah Bank, guess what happens when you move into a market where someone has the same common name as you do? You can't own it. So they had to change. They did not want to change, so much so. The chairman, God bless his heart, as they say, wanted to be Com Trust or C Trust because he didn't want to lose the community trust. They loved it that much. But at the end of the day, the equity in that name meant nothing to the audience they were trying to serve in the future. And so they became Origin Bank, and this is now 10 years ago, I think. And this bank, they live and breathe Origin. They have expanded. This is a relatively new branch we opened for them in the Dallas market, a flagship. And look what's happened. They have 98% asset growth. They're trying to rubber band over the $10 billion mark. They've expanded, they went public, and they've been a top 3 bank to work for the 13th consecutive year, named by American Banker. And listen, was the name why they're successful? No. The people, the culture, amazing leadership. But did the name help them? Did it unlock growth opportunities? And would they have grown that much and that fast without it? I don't think so. And this is the example of, again, they didn't want to, but they're so glad they did. So the reminder now, recap of Signal 3, your name limiting. Well, if you are named for the geographic area in which you serve, that is in fact limiting. If you are named for the geographic area in which you serve and also have a seg name, also limiting. Or back to, if you just can't own it. Community, trust, hundreds of other communities and trust in their network. And these are your signals, again. Audience problem, M&A problem, or geographic problem. And back to, there's good on the other side. So this is a study of just adrenaline rebrands, and I know there are more. This is a couple dozen that we've done over the last 20 years that are at least 2 years old, so we can actually start to track them. And what has happened in all of these cases, in aggregate, they have outperformed peers by 11%. But what's extra interesting is that most of these CAGRs, compound annual growth rate, CAGR rates, were actually lagging behind competitors and behind industry because the name was limiting. So the new name not only helped them get over the hurdle, but helped them exceed industry average. And so that is how strategic naming can drive growth. Thank you for listening to this very focused conversation. Thank you everybody for being here. Enjoy Vegas, get home safely. Appreciate your time.